Cranford. I'm the founder of this new group, and I also run RecWorks, which is a tech recruitment company. So here at RecWorks, we're all about trying to find ways that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry beyond just getting people jobs. And what that means is that we want to do things like career development, things like user groups, mentor introductions, workshops, that kind of thing. And we really want to do it all for free, or at least for free for you guys. So basically, we're paid to find talent by companies, usually developers, and then we take a chunk of the money that we make and drive that into community initiatives like this one. So just recently, we've been doing something a bit differently this year, and it's something that we're calling ladder groups. So we've created the Aspiring Speakers Group, which was all about trying to get people into speaking. So we've had 50 new people speaking within the group, and I know a couple of you are here today. We've had the Aspiring CTOs. We've got about 120, I think, members of that. And we've done a number of mentor introductions and events and things like that. And this is the latest one, which is Aspiring Principal Engineers. It's a working title. So what it's really about is trying to help people become better developers and better software engineers. And there's so much subjectivity around that we're trying to understand what it takes to be, or how different people see that. So that's what we're doing today. So we're on today with Julian Ghionoiu. Sorry, Julian, if I was close. Who's the CTO and founder of Accelerate.io, which is a company that creates tests that identify those special candidates that you can really trust to deliver. So I wanted to bring Julian on to have a chat and understand a bit more about how he assesses developers, how he thinks about this kind of thing, and what we can learn from that. So Julian, welcome today.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. I'm glad to hear you all here. And I can also recognize some familiar faces. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Julian. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Yep.
So Julian, if you wouldn't mind maybe starting with just an introduction about your background into Accelerate.io, how you came to start it, and where you are now with it.
Well, let me separate the two things, my background versus Accelerate. My background is software development. I'm at heart a Java developer, but also being involved with infrastructure, security, cool stuff. Yeah. And I've been working in the industry for years, and I've been trying my best to become better and better at it. And went to conferences, meetups, but one question is what was always on my mind. How can I measure my performance? I would go to a conference, listen to a very good talk, let's say on a new way of doing test-driven development, but then think to myself, is that any better? Is that going to work for me? How can I try it out? Obviously, without trying it out with an employer and ruining their projects, because that's not going to be a good thing to do. You have to try it out on your own. So that's how I designed a couple of small katas. That's what they are, katas. No tech side of things, no nothing. Exercises that I could practice on myself, that I could use as a benchmark to try out new things, like a new technique, a new way of writing tests, a new language, you name it, a consistent setup. And that small kata became a meetup group. We were doing evening pairing sessions, and then we're doing Be Faster workshops where we were all doing the same exercise, but not just one kata. It was a sequential step, multiple rounds that were additive. So I guess what I was trying to get to, a consistent way of measuring my performance. And it evolved into a training workshop, training sessions, and the tech part of it grew around the workshop. And then it became almost fully automated, and I was able to share it with the world. Companies were interested in using that. Unfortunately, not so much for training. That was my initial hope, but they were using it for trying to understand the capabilities of a developer. I wouldn't say test. It is a test, but it's more about gaining insights into how people think and how they code. So then it became Accelerate. And now we're just focusing on this, trying to improve the tech, increase the scope of it, trying to use it more for other areas such as DevOps, security. But yeah, good fun. So I guess that covers myself and the product, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's some really good insight, actually. And in fact, if anyone has any questions, anyone wants to know anything at any point, feel free to unmute your microphone or just chuck your question on the chat window, and I can ask Julian there. Okay, so these katas. Now, I'm not a developer, as you know. I know roughly what a kata is. Can I just show, with a show of thumbs of the four of you with cameras on, do you guys all familiar with katas? Is this something you've all done before? Okay, perfectly. So I'm the only idiot here. Can you just give me then just a sort of 30-second, bring me up to speed, just so I can kind of just loosely get it and yeah, figure out what we're talking about here.
A kata, and the idea comes from martial arts, right? It's an exercise that you do it over and over again until you get better at it. The core idea is consistency. You want to have the same setup every time, and that frees you up to experiment with different techniques, different ways of doing the same kata. And more importantly, try to afterwards try to reflect on how that went, so that you can see if something works, something is better. Sometimes you would just do a kata just to improve your core speed. Get better at using your tools, for example, or shortcuts.
Okay. Again, show of thumbs. How many people have done katas this year? How many people do this regularly? Okay, 2. All right, cool. So it's not the sort of thing that people will do every month, every week. Some people will, some people won't. I understand. So what kind of exercises did you start doing as part of your meetup group then? What would be a classic example of something you went through, the problem you would solve within this kata?
So I guess there are a lot of katas out there. Some of them are designed for refactoring, others for like greenfield. A good example would be, let's start with a checkout kata. Are you guys familiar with a checkout kata? Thumbs up if you are. Okay. A brief context. In a supermarket, you have items and prices. Everyone understands that. And then you're asked to model checking out some items, like buying some items. You're buying some beers, you're buying some vegetables and some meat, and then you're asked to compute the prices for those and apply some offers. That's as easy as that. So domain-wise, it's not a special domain. Everyone can relate to it. But then you start coding and you start modeling that in your software. And you can choose to write tests first, write tests after. You can choose to introduce abstractions, classes, or you can choose to do it just functional. There are a lot of ways of just solving that tiny little kata.
Okay. And so how long would that take for this to be solved? Is that the sort of thing that would last 3 weeks, or is it the sort of thing that you do in 20 minutes, half an hour, like just to kind of bring me up to speed on where you're at with this?
This particular one, you can do it in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Or you can choose to spend 3 hours just to try and polish the design until you're happy with it.
Right. Okay. So you've got your checkout kata as an example, and we could give it to everyone here that's on the call, and everyone would do it, and everyone would have a solution, right? But the idea of this, as you say, is you go through it again and again and again. So would you then be like, right, here's my first solution, and you look at it again and you say, no, come back with something better? Or would you say develop that concept so that it does something different?
It's a deliberate practice exercise. You do it to improve your own ways of doing things. So yeah, you would look at past solutions and compare with what you did now, or you try and contrast approaches. I wouldn't go as far as comparing that first iteration with other people's.
Okay, fine. But once you've done your first iteration,
yep.
What does the second iteration do? Is the second iteration just do it again but better, like make a more elegant solution but change nothing? Is it just a refactoring exercise, or is it then where you would extend, you would introduce new parts to the problem to solve?
Right, I see where you're getting at. I think the concept of a second iteration is particular to accelerate the product, and I haven't touched on that. So that's the first kata is you have a spec, you're implementing that in some form of way, and your next take will be either the same or you change something, change one single variable just to see if it has any impact on what you just did.
Okay.
With Accelerate, what we did was we're trying to find a way of measuring code quality or development speed. Like how would you define code quality? And that's a very hard question to ask for everyone, right? Because it's very subjective and it's elusive. With Accelerate, what we're trying to define is code quality should always give you a return on investment. So if you've done the stuff right now and it's good, then you should be able to, one, be faster in second iterations, like changing requirements should be easier to implement. And then second, it should be more readable, easier to manage, and you should be able to maintain the pace over multiple increments. And with this in mind, we're trying to transform everything into time. So you start with a small kata like checkout. And then on top of the same code, we add new requirements. So they're incrementally getting added more and more. And that puts pressure on your design, on your technique, and on yourself. If you really know what you're doing, and if you were careful with your abstractions and you had your test coverage, then you should be able to easily accommodate changes. And that's how we're trying to measure performance. Like, can you easily accommodate change and can you sustain the pace? And it's evolved into a 5-round exercise where requirements are constantly being added. And that's what we use as a benchmark. So that's the evolved one. But it all starts with the concept of kata and doing something repeatable, consistency.
Okay, this is cool, right? So this is interesting. We tried this once because I've been around Java development for years and years now, so I kind of understand it well enough to keep up in a conversation-ish. That will be tested now, I'm sure, but I don't know. I couldn't write "Hello World" just to explain where I'm at with tech. You know, I don't know anything. I don't know anything you'd have to do. So we obviously have a lot of new recruiters that come in, and we had to explain, using me that can't do any code, how tech all works. And I did it by almost an identical or a very similar solution way back like 8-9 years ago. And we basically had a bunch of Lego, different specific parts of Lego. And we said, build a thing that can hold an egg. Build anything that can hold an egg. It had to be an inch off the floor or something like that. And it was cool, it was fun. And some people built these real elegant solutions straight away. And then the idea was we'd iterate, and the second time would be, right, now build something that will hold 3 eggs. Now build something that will hold 6 eggs. And of course, the more elegant solutions up front led to much better things further down the line. And it sounds quite similar. So I'm kind of, that's how I'm comparing it at the moment.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
No, okay.
Yeah, the reality is that the less elegant solution at first is the one that usually wins in the long term, the simplest one.
Yeah.
The solutions that are more complex, they have larger surface area, more abstractions are harder to change. So in the long term, they're going to end up slowing the developers down.
Yeah.
But
yes, that 100%. That's kind of what I meant in terms of elegant, in terms of simplicity and just strong, almost architectural thinking up front of how it could scale further down the line. Yeah. So then you're doing this. So I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of if it's the 3rd or 4th or 5th step, then if they've started with a really bad design that they've then had to move forward with, they're going to perform poorly in the later steps, right?
Yep.
Okay. So there's no, yeah. All right. Okay. I'm on the same page. Okay, cool. So if you had somebody that took this test and performed poorly, in fact, let me ask that. What does performing well and performing poorly represent? Is it just time? Is there a kind of a way that you can think about that, a way that you can get across, this person got 78%, this person did it in 3 minutes? You know, is there a kind of quantifiable way that you can rank people?
Should I share some data?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, let me do a share screen. I think you've disabled screen sharing.
Oh yeah, sorry, let me make you co-host.
Yeah.
And again, anyone else has got any ideas or questions rather, feel free to just chuck them in the chat.
Let's try share the entire desktop.
Inbox 0, that's very impressive.
Yeah, almost 0.
Almost.
Yeah, that's how I like to operate. If if I can't deal with something now, I'll snooze it for later. Right, so in a nutshell, this is how it looks, right? You have your candidate or developer running it on their laptop, and then the Accelerate system will feed in requirements, and the candidate will solve the solution, run it locally. If it works locally, that's all that matters. And then you have new requirements coming in. Let me see if I can move this one. Can I just hide it? Yeah. So the code evolves, it puts pressure. Well, at the same time, the Accelerate server is checking the validity of that solution. So you're not able to progress to the new round unless your implementation implements all the requirements, and the server-side tests are not visible to the candidate. So that it will extensively test the requirements. If you get it wrong, so if you're running on your laptop and you say, yeah, I'm done, I'm going to submit it, then you get a penalty, a 10-minute penalty and some feedback. And you go through this game over and over again until you solve the requirement, and so on. So the two things that matter, one is the total time it took you, which might be longer because if you had penalties, then they get added on top of your final time, and the number of penalties, because that's an indication of either the lack of tests or the candidate trying to move too fast and not thinking about edge cases. It's like a game, really. And then a report is compiled with, let's look at one report. I'm going to pick a middle one. They're all anonymized, so you can't see who's who. What I'm seeing here is total clock time, how long they took to go through all the rounds. So this is just clock time. And then the number of penalties. These are failed submissions. And that's what I'm looking. What good looks like. One is a fast clock time. That matters a lot. That means you know what you're doing. You can quickly implement a requirement, move on, do it again, and repeat the process and complete the challenge. So whoever does it on the 4 hour, it's decent. If you do it under 2 hours, well, that is top performance. Then in terms of penalties, getting a few penalties is okay, because you might have misunderstood the requirements are not clear. So it's okay to get feedback from a live system. Like, I'm going live, I'm gonna get some feedback from my customers. That's okay. Getting more than 40 minutes of penalties, that's not okay. That would mean lack of tests. And then we also look for test coverage. That could be an indicator of bad development practice. Another insight that we get from the report is, where is the time being spent? So I can see here that we started with round 1, but then round 2 was a big refactoring. So I can dig into that. I can look at what happened in round 2. I can see there was a development, tests, and a kind of a rewrite for this solution. In fact, this is what I'm trying to convey here, is that these are insights. They all come into play. It's hard to say that if you've done this in 4 hours, you're definitely good. There are more factors involved. The purpose of the exercise is to learn as much as possible about a developer. And if you do that yourself, about yourself. And in contrast, I can say, let me look at this one. You can see a different pattern here. Like, this is just judging from the rounds. I can see that round 1, 2, 3 were done quickly, which means small incremental changes. And then a refactoring was done in round 4. But again, different people approach this differently.
And is there something specific that is introduced in each round that would kind of, you know, if they had spent longer in round 2, that would indicate they weren't particularly strong in this particular field or any particular thing, or could it just be, you know, is it far more random than that?
No, I think the rounds are pretty well balanced. As you saw here, you have one person spending more time doing round 2, other person spending more doing round 4. It's more about their development style. When do you feel like you can safely introduce abstractions? My personal preference will be to defer design decisions to the last minute possible, so that I have more data on how to refactor. But some people will prefer a big design up front, which is fine if it pays out. Like if you're really good at feeling the domain and modeling it so that it closely matches reality, then it works in the long term because you're able to extend it. But the danger of doing a design up front is if you get it wrong, then it's probably harder to change. Let me see if I have an example of that. Let's see. So if I see someone spending more time during round 1, but then also having to spend another big chunk of time in round 4, this means whatever they've done in round 1 hasn't paid off. So they're now having to rework or rewrite the solution. I have seen people having to completely rewrite during round 5, which is quite painful. But it's part of the exercise, right? It's part of understanding how your technique has an impact on your performance. And when you optimize for long term. The problem of just looking at the state of code after one round is that it's so subjective. I can see they've introduced abstractions, right? Trying to carve out a class that fits in nicely. It probably didn't work out. The problem with just assessing one round is that without new requirements, you can't really judge quality. You don't know if that's going to work or not. And you can't predict the future. So, and that's the struggle with measuring quality.
Does the language make a difference as well? So like this one is Java, the other one's Ruby.
No, funnily enough, no. We had 500 people that have taken this particular challenge, and the distribution is even. So the language doesn't matter. It matters how well you can use your tools. If you're comfortable using Vim and Python and you're productive with that, perfect. Keep on doing that. It doesn't matter. Same for, I've seen people doing C# equally fine, JavaScript, yeah.
So interesting. So this Kat, you talked about the checkout one that is then extended. Is the checkout one and that's it, or is there like 100 different tests that people can take? Like how many options are there? How many different styles of kata are there to go through?
With our platform, we tend to focus on 3 main challenges.
Okay.
We have a smaller one, we have this one and another one. So because the more data we gather around the challenge, the better our predictions can be. Because we do some analysis on them, and obviously a company can define their own challenge with our help. Yeah,
interesting.
If they need something banking specific or something more towards the UI, JavaScript, we can accommodate that. The concept is the same. Like we're trying to measure performance by forcing a design to change.
Yeah, the reason I asked about the different katas is if somebody has taken your test, could they not then retake it? And, if somebody taken my egg, holding 6 eggs and known what iteration 4 is going to look like, then they could obviously come at that problem very differently straight away. And so that's the challenge we've had before when looking at this kind of thing, is how that scales in terms of different, you've sort of got one chance, and then if you get it wrong, you're out. Is that what you found, or?
Well, we're not that successful yet.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. As a company, you can easily change your challenge.
Yeah.
If you have concerns that the test is out there, well known, then you should then switch to a new challenge.
For sure. Yeah. It certainly makes that a bit more difficult when if you want to say, have another go, then they've done it in 5 minutes each time, then it's it's just because I've seen it before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, with this, yes, it helps if you've done it before, definitely. But you still have to showcase how you do it. So you have the option of recording the screen. It's an optional now by default, but people do share their approach. So they actually want to. I'm not sharing my screen. Yeah. They want to showcase to the employer how they do it. because the relationship between a candidate and a hiring company is like this, right? Yeah, a hiring company advertises a role, which means they need help with a project, a particular deliverable. And then you as a candidate apply to the role saying, yes, I can help you. Well, there is no trust here. The question that you need to answer is, I can help you and I am qualified to do so. So as a candidate, it's up to you to prove that you're actually worth it. You're worth their effort, you can deliver, you can solve their problem. So you actually want to showcase your technique. This is how I work. This is how I do things. This is the type of code that I'm producing. And also, by the way, this is my experience. I've worked for company X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. Just as well, the penalties. Just so I understand that part of it as well. If they've read the documentation clearly and thought that through, then technically they could get through without ever having a penalty, right? Like, yeah. Okay, cool. Okay.
What percentage of people actually do get through without any time penalties at all?
I would say 5%.
Wow.
It's normal. You don't have a product owner to clarify requirements with. So your only way of getting more feedback is to try it out. Because with any set of certification can't cover all the edge cases. And you know that in your normal day-to-day business development. You get some specs, but all the edge cases are not there. You might be lucky to have a product owner that can clarify them, or you might just have to bite the bullet and go live.
Yeah, ship it, see if the customer complains.
Well,
I have a question. Do you guys give recommendations on TDD or using code coverage, or the aspiring candidate has to know that that's a best practice and apply it?
it's up to we're not interacting with the candidate directly. It's up to the hiring company. If they say TDD is important for them, they would advise the candidates to showcase their TDD skills, which is fair enough. If they prefer particular technology like a language, like if they want to hire for Python, they would suggest the candidate that it would be good if they use Python. It's not mandatory, but and the system is designed so that we don't prescribe a technology. You can do it without tests. Some people have done it. Yeah, definitely. You can do it without TDD, without any test coverage. Well, I must say, if you do this without penalties and without tests, that is something. So I would like to see that.
That's someone that's done it before, 9 times out of 10.
Maybe. Don't know.
I kind of worry maybe, someone doesn't get any penalties. Maybe they are being super, super cautious. Like they could have moved faster, assuming it was okay to, assuming it wasn't too risky to ship something that didn't quite meet all the requirements. Maybe they could have moved faster by shipping and getting some feedback and using that feedback.
That's true.
Can I have an example of what would cause a penalty?
For example, with the checkout cart, all right? It's okay, you have a price for a beer, let's say 10. What happens if you don't have any products in your basket, like the null case? Or you have a product that's not in your inventory? What would you return then? And so on.
So it's failing tests on the Accelerate side rather than your own kind of.
Yeah, on your own, you would write a test. You would make an assumption saying that, well, if I get an empty basket, I'm going to just return -1, which might be a wrong assumption. And then you go live, you get some feedback and 10 minutes penalty.
So it's not based on sort of subjective things like code smells or you've used this method 3 times, we're going to penalize you.
Oh, no, absolutely not. We want this to be like as objective as possible, like the same experience on all languages. So if something is not comparable across language, we're not going to add it in. Things like static analysis, lines of code, or complexity. They're not relevant across languages, so we're not adding them in. Coverage is. 100% coverage means the same in all languages. And that's how we treat things. And also requirements are either yes or not. Is it passing this test for this requirement? Yes, no.
Okay, so you say you've had 500 of these now looked at, Julian. Do you go back and look at every single one personally and look at what they did? Like, I imagine you did that at first. That must be quite an interesting thing to do. Do you do that?
Well, I still look at all the reports that come in.
Okay.
If you split 500 reports over 2 years, 3 years, they're not that many.
Mm.
Yeah. I do find them quite interesting.
And have you ever found anywhere you're like, wow, like this is an amazing approach?
Well, I've done the challenge myself and I designed it. Yeah.
Mm.
It took me roughly 3 hours with 20 minutes of penalties. I've seen people doing this in 1 hour and a half.
Wow.
And I was with a completely different setup than I was expecting. It was Vim and JavaScript, fully test driven. So test first, JavaScript, 1 hour and a half. He just nailed it. I was like, wow.
It's amazing. Can you give me his email address, please?
No, because I don't know who he is.
Of course. Okay, great. Wow, that's amazing. And I can imagine, if you see some that have done really well, then it just must be.
What I do know is that the company have hired that guy.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
Yeah, I had a call with him, with them, and say, yep, that he's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That I don't mind. I know that just by looking at all those videos and recordings, I'm not that good myself. I have a lot of things that I can improve. And I find things every day.
Mm.
I'm slightly uncomfortable with that sometimes, but that's the nature of our game. We're not our best. We're always on a learning path.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that I'm really interested in is if you've looked at these and you've looked at 500, if you have seen any, like, I guess what I'm really looking for is how to deconstruct, in your opinion, what makes a good developer, and then how we could start training or looking at working on things within this group that would, that we can get people to do. So I'm interested in two different sides of that. One, what are the common mistakes that you see across people that get this wrong? And then obviously we'll see what we could do about that. And two, what are the common kind of things that these top people that get the good results do? Is there anything you could share on either side of that?
Yeah, definitely. Because that's the question I keep asking myself. What slows people down? That's my thing. Like, whenever I look at the report, I'm trying to figure out what went wrong and what went well on the flip side. And the common theme throughout all those videos is the cost of a bad abstraction. The moment you introduce something, a class, a function, you're introducing an abstraction, and that needs to pay off in the long term, in the subsequent rounds. If you've introduced an abstraction and that doesn't work quite well, for example, a class that maps the prices, that will get in your way in the future rounds. The more you can defer design decisions, the better. That's what I found. Or if you have a crystal ball and you know what the right abstraction should be, and you stumble upon it, you're lucky. That's when it works. But that made me more careful in regards to when I design, like how I design, when I design, because I know that's going to have a long-term impact. So I'm trying not to rush. The more I can postpone my design decisions, the better. So that's one. The second thing was know your tooling. Being able to be very confident with your ID, with your language, just to move fast. That's important because it frees you up to think about abstractions. You don't have to worry about how to write this class, how to move things around. That's number two, because I could see people struggling with tests. I trying to figure out how to use the test framework because they haven't used it that often. And then number three is related to number 2, not refactoring. And the way this plays out is like this. You've introduced some abstractions. You can see they're bad because they're causing you pain. You're struggling to work around them, but you're not confident in your tools and you're afraid to refactor, or you think it's going to take longer. So you postpone the design decisions and you build on top of existing abstractions. And that creates a bigger mess, a bigger ball of mud. And you end up not refactoring and just suffering all the way to the end. The flip side is, if you try to defer design decisions, so you let the design evolve, but you're comfortable with your refactoring technique and your tool, then the moment you know an abstraction is the right one, then you can immediately change it to the right shape. And I could see good people doing that quite often, like rewriting methods, deconstructing a class. That's another thing that you tend to see, like this class doesn't work, I'm going to inline everything, because they're comfortable with their tools, and then start the design process again. So these would be my 3 things: abstractions, tools, and refactoring.
Okay, can I just understand the third one again? So the third thing is you started off in your first iteration, you've done something that you thought was right, and then you've come up with, the second iteration, you've got to do it, and it means that you can see that your initial design decision was wrong, and so you then have an option: do you refactor and try and create something that would be easier to do, or do you build something on top of what is already a mess, right? Thus making it worse.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So you're saying it would be better at that point to refactor? Sorry, just that's the bit I wasn't too sure of what you were saying. What should people be doing?
I would say that top developers will refactor because they're very comfortable with their refactoring skills. Yeah, okay. It's a choice. And so this type of kata is trying to simulate the real life environment. I bet you guys are faced with the same decision in your day-to-day job. Do I refactor now, or do I build on top of the existing code just to deliver the feature? That happens every time. If you're comfortable, if you and your teams are very comfortable refactoring and they can do it at speed, that's the key. You can execute at speed. Then it's more likely that you're going to refactor and then get the benefits of having a good abstraction to support your business, your domain model.
Okay. Do you think there's an example? I don't know if anybody would think of this, of a tech test that you would go for an interview at another company, where if you have deferred that design decision, if it isn't that strong, you'd get marked down for that kind of thing. Is that something that could happen?
I don't think I understand the question.
So just to what you've learned here is, given the fact that there's going to be like iteration 2, 3, and 4 further down the line, and there's going to be new things that are added, that when you're doing your first iteration, you don't yet know what they're going to look like.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make any big design decisions early in case you make the wrong one, right? But in other situations, when you're going to submit some kind of technical test for a job, an interview, a tech screen, would other companies sort of see something that didn't have a big design decision and mark you down for that?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I have my own share of experiences in this area. The way this normally goes is, I'll tell you now, 80% of the companies still use a take-home challenge. Is that correct, Barry? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like you have your own tech test, which is normally a set of requirements. You're asked to implement this. Yep. And then they're going to ask you to submit your best solution. Well, that is highly subjective, because what does best mean? In real world, it will be just come up with the simplest possible solution that has a decent test coverage and then move on from there. What tends to happen is the best solution is deemed the one that can accommodate all possible future requirements. So it has a lot of extension points, it is modeled, it kind of looks nice, it feels nice, but it's probably not what you're going to build in your day-to-day job, because that's impractical. So these tend to be quite subjective, because what are you assessing against? What does good look like? You're not going to be able to define that. So it kind of transforms into, yes, I can see you've written tests, I can see you've added classes, so you know how you use your language. But then when you come into a face-to-face interview, or when you do the online remote interview, we're going to talk about code. So it turns out into a discussion about coding practices.
Okay. All right. So I feel like I know the answer to this question before I ask it, but in terms of what other people could do, like if somebody took your test today, failed it miserably, and were not strong at the skills that it would that it tests, that it screens, but wanted to get better at that within maybe 6 months, what could they do to get quicker and better as quickly as possible?
Well, ideally, you shouldn't optimize for getting better at the tests, right? You should strive to get better at what you do day to day, which means trying to deliver features faster and shape your technique so that it supports it. And TDD does help, but done right. So trying to always think about the time to release a feature and do it in small baby steps. The flip side is I've seen people, they say they're doing TDD, but what they do, they write tests and we end up having a lot of tests. Well, that works from the design quality perspective, but writing and maintaining those 100 tests, it's very expensive. So you're not actually becoming faster, you're just moving the time somewhere else. You're moving the time from fixing design problems into maintaining a very large suite of tests. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and you only get there by experience. So by just doing this over and over again. And when you manage to use it in your day-to-day job, then you get more improvement because you test it in a real life scenario. And the problems are bigger. The test suites are larger, but it all applies. If it works on a small scale, it will also work on a larger scale.
Okay. Matt, I can see you've unmuted there. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this system seems like it'll fit senior people as a assessment tool quite well. But do you think you could make any changes, and what would they be to suit even mid-level or junior developers, rather than have to manage a different recruitment process for seniors, juniors, or mid-level?
Well, what we advise for juniors, we use the FizzBuzz kata as a starting point, where it's the same idea. I mean, the FizzBuzz, you can solve it in 5 minutes, and then you add 5 more rounds so that it becomes like a 20 minutes exercise. What you want to see there is, can they write code? Can they use the RDE? Ideally, can they write tests? If they don't write tests, they'll probably realize the value of testing pretty soon, because FizzBuzz has a lot of edge cases, plus with additional requirements. So it's a good starting point for juniors. They don't have to think about design and abstractions. With FizzBuzz, that's just a tiny, small function. But they get the feel for the value of testing. Yeah, so we still use it for juniors. It's fine. The only issue I'm seeing with juniors is some of them are not comfortable with IDEs and package managers. So this, you run it on your laptop, it connects to a server. So you start with some boilerplate code in your language of choice. You need to be able to start a project locally. So you have a Java project, you need to either have Maven or Gradle. It's all provided there, but you need to understand how they work. So it's a learning curve there. But once they get started, then it's just a normal language challenge. In some ways, juniors expect something like HackerRank and Candidity, because there they don't have to do the setup, and that works well for them. They go in online and then they have this bit of a window where they can write their solution and they can just hack something together. So yeah, you're right, this is not a good fit for juniors. This is aimed at top developers, good developers, and yeah.
Down to your question there, Matt. Yeah, perfect. Chris and Dale, I see you both come off mute. Did you have something to add there, Chris?
I'm just curious, really. We're talking a lot about you're using Accelerate, or companies using Accelerate to assess potential hires. Is that what everyone's using it for? Is anyone using it for the initial purpose of developers using it to do katas and then identify where they're going to improve and maybe come back and try them again and so on?
Well, I'm going to give you a straight answer, Chris. No, they're not using this for the original purpose.
So,
yeah. And the way this goes normally is we have this discussion. They think it's a good idea. Yeah. But they can't justify allowing a developer to spend 4, 5, 6 hours doing a kata while they could be working on features. So the cost to them is too big. They're not going to invest in the long term.
There's an answer to that, or an answer to that, which I should probably be tactful and not say, but yeah, that makes me feel pretty sad.
Yeah. The problem is it's hard to quantify. For example, you're doing this kata now, right? You're going to spend your entire day doing this, and you will get better, but you can't measure it. So you can't justify it from the business perspective. You can't put a number on this.
Interesting.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes me feel sad, but yeah, makes sense.
Dale, did you have something you wanted to add again as well?
Yeah, it was kind of like the timescale of things. So if I've, say, applied for my 5th job and they've given me this, it's like potentially 5 test assessments I've had to do. And maybe I don't have the full energy to spend 5 or 6 hours. So can you kind of measure that in a way? It's like, okay, I'm tired of doing all these tests to get a job. I've got one extra massive test to do now. How can you kind of factor that into having a good developer versus a tired one who doesn't necessarily have 5 or 6 hours to do this assessment?
Well, if you're a good developer, you do it in under 4 hours, under 3 hours. But yeah, so the question is, these tests do take time. Now, my question for you will be, do you have any other way of proving that you know your stuff to the company?
Yeah, like a GitHub account or something.
And let's take your GitHub account. What does that prove?
Probably shows a lot of hacking projects I've done. Nothing kind of industry standard.
And you can still use that somehow. Like, can you, for example, if they say, well, we're really big on TDD, and can you do TDD? Now, my question will be, how would you prove that you can do TDD?
Yeah, you'd have to demonstrate or provide an example you've done.
Yeah.
So would it be like continuous? You couldn't pause halfway, come back?
You can pause.
You can pause.
Yeah. And you do it unattended in your own time, so you can pause. You can choose to record the screen or not. It's up to you.
Cool.
So that time could be cheated in a way. You could like pause the screen, figure it out, upload your solution.
It will probably show up on the recording and on the history of the source code. We've had people trying to abuse the pause and resume, and you can see that. Yeah, we can, because it logs everything. You see what's happening. If you see someone abusing pause and resume and then suddenly code appears, yeah, you know what's happening. And as an employment, you get that information, so it's easier for you to make a hiring decision then.
Yeah, we had a CTO's event recently around hiring and things, and tech screens came up then, and obviously it is a challenge, as you say there, Dale. We've seen it. I mean, what was about 10, 11 years ago when I tried to get a bunch of my clients together when they started coming through and say, can we just come up with one test that you all agree on? So developers just have to take one test and then you can all make a decision. And that was an interesting evening, as I'm sure you can imagine, trying to get a bunch of CTOs to agree on the right way of testing people. So that's why we haven't really looked at it for the last 10 years. But it is tough, and it is a hard thing. But as you say, if you're looking to, it's the kind of tool that I think would fit a company that needs top developers and needs people to prove that this isn't just a kind of, are you all right at developing? This is a real, if you want to get the Porsche, Ferrari kind of jobs, then you need to prove you're at that level. So it's only going to be the people that are prepared to invest that time, I think. You're always going to see a bunch of those, the people, exactly. You see so many of them from a recruitment perspective that are just like, I'm not doing another tech test. I've done too many, and it's, you know, too many on the go. It's just a challenge of any technical test, I think, to do.
I find they're biased anyway, because they do bias towards those, you know, without children. I've got 2 toddlers. I cannot spend 4 hours in an evening doing a tech test. So, you know, and then I don't know if it's worth sharing our process. Our process is an hour and a half face-to-face beforehand, but it's half an hour culture, half an hour pairing with one of our senior engineers, and then half an hour tech deep dive, which is just talking through solutions, which will give you the technical knowledge, or shows that somebody has deep technical knowledge. The pairing shows you their techniques, again, showing that they're set up, they know how to use their IEDE, they know how to write a kata. And again, we've got a set of 10 katas that somebody can pick from. So it's similar, but this is, you know, mega condensed into an hour and a half face-to-face, and then that's it. We got rid of tech tests last year, I think, for that reason, that they seem to be wildly unreliable, and especially off-putting to people that have the capability to do it 9 to 5, but they don't want to spend 3 hours in the evening doing a tech test.
Yeah, what I found, if you try and shorten it, you are losing some insights. If you're happy with that, then and it works for you, then it's fine.
I think it's the fact that we're actually pairing so that we can ask questions if we're unsure of anything. That gives us, you know, as much insight into the way they work and how they process things and what they're thinking as.
My ideal process will also involve some pairing, but pairing has a different purpose. It's about communication and sharing knowledge. With pairing in a short time, you cannot see how they cope with bigger designs and how they operate at speed. Like, what's the delivery speed? You see very good people. They know what they're talking about. They're interacting very well, but it will take them double or triple to deliver a feature, and that's what you're probably missing. It's the whole, how the delivery speed, and that's elusive. With a take-home challenge, you don't get it. With pairing, you're missing it. So my ideal recruitment process will involve both. And what we advise the company we work with is the accelerate test as a proof of competency, like a delivery speed, TDD, to demonstrate technical capabilities. And then a face-to-face pairing / whiteboarding session where you discuss this. Practices, architectural design decisions, cover everything, but focus on the things that the take-home challenges misses. So everything that's not there, you cover it in a face-to-face, and then the cultural fit. Refactoring is also a big thing. If that is important, then it's worth covering that as a pairing session.
I do agree with Julian. I mean, doing TDD the right way, it's very difficult. And there's a lot of people I've experienced dealing with people that talk a lot. They maybe try to go around a question, change the subject, but it's when you start working that you see that they're slow. They didn't know that much about TDD, for example. I do agree with Julian that these tests can help a lot.
You probably got here some insight into how that evening went that I tried to do with all my clients. I think there's so many different ways, so many different ideas, and nothing is perfect because, as you say, it's so hard. Like there was a post that Malcolm Gladwell once wrote about how to assess talent, and he was saying something along the lines of, it really takes years to figure out if the talent is there. It isn't something that you can know really. Like sometimes, how many times have people got through probation, and it still takes time to figure out if people are actually right. So you're trying to condense a decision that might take years or months into a few hours. It's such a difficult thing to do in a short space of time. I don't think, I've certainly not come across anything that's perfect, but any extra information that you can get that might give insight. Dale saying with the GitHub and Matt with the pairing and that on top, and obviously Julian's tests, they all give this sort of slightly different insight into how someone is. But I mean, it just takes as much of it as possible, really, to know 100%. But yeah,
and to Matt's point, it's all about trade-offs, right? If you have a shorter test, then you might appeal to more people. If you have a longer test, yeah, you get more insights, but some people might not want to do it or might not have the capacity to do it. Yeah, I know what you mean about toddlers.
All right, guys, I've just seen we've gone over time. So listen, thank you so much for everyone there. I hope we covered everyone's questions. Julian, I really appreciate you taking the time to go through that for us all as well. I don't quite know what the next stage is going to be. Please let me know feedback, each of you on the call. I'd love to know what you thought about this. I'd love to know which direction you want to go in with the group. Julian, I think there might be something that we can do with these casts. If you know, we'll keep talking. I'll keep talking to everyone. So please just keep it coming my way. And yeah, I hope to see you all at the next one.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
many
guys.
thanks.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian.
Been awesome. Cheers, Barry. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.